So we do our job is to work within a community to improve the opportunity for businesses to start and grow regardless of their shape or size. That's Rain's model. So it's a little different than you'll find with any other organizations. A little broader and definitely focused on building the ecosystem. I would say more than directly supporting the entrepreneur. We do directly support the entrepreneur, but our high value, our top level value proposition is building the ecosystem.
Yeah, ecosystem is everything. This feels very full circle for me. The fact that this kind of, I mean, prior to getting a job at Arcimoto, I was just kind of, Eugene Rain isn't quite Rain, but in my head, it's a similar acronym. So it's very kismet that it's like now I'm financially free because of help that I got from Eugene Rain. So, thanks to all of it. And now I'm at the place where I started my own small business, Kenzie and I, as the two of us. I mean, I don't know if obviously you wouldn't probably be the person as the deputy director. You'd be managing people who do it. But like, what are some, because a lot of people might have the wrong questions starting it. Like, what are some of the right questions we should be asking?
When starting a business, I feel, for me, I actually developed what I call a clarity framework, which is like a one-page business plan. And the questions that I ask that I think are absolutely essential to get clear and concise about, the first is, what's your idea? And within that are three other questions, which are, what problem are you solving? How are you solving it? And what makes your solution special? Okay? Until we can answer that in a very short sentence.
That should be the main thing of every single person's website. Honestly, all these websites are very fluffy, but even if it said that question and then the answer, that would be very good.
It's absolutely essential, and most business owners struggle with clarity because if things are left ambiguous, they feel like they've got play, they've got room to...
We're very kind to ourselves in our mind.
We are.
Logical gaps and stuff.
Yes, and actually that's what my book is very much about that.
Would you want to take a minute just because I am curious?
Yeah, sure. So this all comes back to becoming a better professional, but it actually starts with very much outside the business world. So 37 years ago, I was 20 years old, made a bunch of decisions one night, and for all the right reasons, but they ended up with me driving off a cliff into the Wilson River.
But really actually driving
off a cliff into the Wilson River.
How late was it?
It was about 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, 20 years old, one long night of a lot of decisions tends to be late.
Yeah. So from that, two things happened, both related to me and my identity. The first is that I put a bunch of labels on myself: stupid, incapable, impotent, and ultimately unworthy. And I wore those labels for a number of years, and those labels kept me from moving forward in my life. For reasons that I honestly, even in the book, I cannot specifically identify, I was able, after about 4 years, to take those labels off. They weren't serving me. I recognized that. And I was able to replace them with different labels. Blessed to be alive, and needing to do something of value.
I love that you say blessed to be alive. So I'm actually overall very anti-label in the sense that it's really nice to just wake up and not be like, oh, I'm this person, I should act this way because I'm presenting. But just being someone who's like, they're a little bit of a wild, like who knows what they're doing. But because obviously I have screen printing stuff, I'm completely switching it up away from Talks with Tell You. This is just a passion project. Yeah. Like I want my kid to be able to hear what I'm like at 20. And when I'm 60, I want to remember all the people I was talking to at different times in my life. So it's, for that. And then obviously people can come on. It's like how it's said, and then I can actually write this down and have it on my website as the ideas that you said. That was great. But I did have one sort of way I'd almost label myself or like have other people do it. It's like, we're not all there. I'm certainly not there, but as a fun way to say it, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, and I'm free. I'm loved, I'm balanced, and I'm grateful just to be. So you're blessed to be alive, grateful just to be. I'm like, it's just like if I have to label myself, I'd have aspirational labels that I'd love to live up to.
Yeah.
And funny enough, the other one is nothing matters, but it feels good to do good, which is your other one, which is, so it's very funny that at some core moments in life, you kind of come back to the basics, which is nothing really matters, but you can take that nihilistically, or you can take it like, but you know, the things that matter is reducing suffering in people and connections with loved ones.
I love the fact that you see that. What I have found, so at the time that I was making this shift, changing my labels, I didn't recognize what was going on. I just did it. Now, 4 decades later, having worked with business owners and professionals across the gamut, and then also experiencing severe pigeonholing of labels with my mom, I have come to recognize how often people are caged in labels that they haven't consciously chosen for themselves,
Yep.
but their subconscious has chosen for them. And the dynamic is that once we've adopted a label, so in the case of my mom, who is now passed, in the case of my mom, for the last 2 decades of her life, she wore the label of victim. And you could not get her to remember a moment in her life when she was not being victimized.
Wow.
Her brain wouldn't let her, because what I've discovered through narrative identity has been what I've been studying really for about 20 years. And what I've discovered is that our brain doesn't care about us moving forward towards some big goal, being even happy in our life. What it wants to do is safeguard that identity, whatever it is. And so if my identity, my chosen identity, is victim, then the only stories that it will bring to the foreground are ones that support that identity. And if anything shows up that is going to conflict with that will contradict that choice, it will discount it. And all of this is natural. It's a natural part of our existence, and it's designed to keep us safe and small, safe in a cocoon of our own belief. The idea that we would challenge our own beliefs is fairly modern. It's not something that we evolved to do.
Yeah, a lot of people identify not even like with their labels, but with their idea. Like, like when you might be working with someone, they have an idea and they take it sometimes as a personal affront. Like, we really like identity. I'm curious, because I haven't met a lot of people who are just aware of the cognizant of that. Because I've thought a lot about labels as someone who likes and to be fair, there's 17 pairs of Yeezys. I'm quite a big fan of Kanye West, which is no big secret to the world. But he's very like, don't put me in a box. So, like, he's like a producer, and then he's a rapper. And now he's a $5 billion creator of apparel and all this stuff. It's like from a young age that kind of said to me, I'm like, and then I see a lot of people saying like, oh well, I'm this, and then you see them following that path even when it no longer serves them. Like, I almost think it's not only the fact that it's like you either define your life, like you have to define yourself, or life defines you for you, which probably usually isn't necessarily a good thing. But also, it's like once you define yourself, like you keep doing it. Like a basketball player will get an injury, or I have a rock climbing friend, he gets like hurts his hand, but that's his identity. Yeah. So they just keep doing it. So I realized at a certain point, I'm like, oh, if I identify myself based on something, it'll come back to bite me. So I personally don't identify. But have you found strong identities? Like, is blessed to be alive a way you identify yourself, or like where are you at in terms of that?
So I've recognized that self-deprecating, disempowering labels are sort of a constant. The brain, that's actually the easiest thing for the brain to justify. Failure is the easiest possible label because it is so easy to prove. Just fail. Just don't do the thing. Yeah. And you've proven yourself right. So that type of disempowering label is it's just very easy for the brain to latch on to. So I've realized that I'm just constantly monitoring how I'm labeling myself, how I'm responding in certain instances, and is that response productive or not. I call it the command reflex. And ultimately, kind of getting back to the book, that's what the book is about. It's about building your command reflex so that you can be aware when you're responding. You can take a look at the reaction that is being generated by your emotions and physiology, which all happens before you have a chance to actually think.
And so the command is evaluating, is this serving me? Is this a benefit or should I not?
Yeah.
Man, so defining yourself subconsciously as an anxious person is probably one of the harder traps to come out of in life.
It really is.
Wow, like thinking about that specifically, because, yeah, man, a lot of people are, so Youth Era, the nonprofit we're working for, is specifically for at-risk, like suicide prevention in youth. Mm-hmm. And I've had a very fortunate life where I haven't really had to deal with any of that necessarily, and I've always kind of checked it. And a lot of times, as soon as I recognize something, like for a long, like since I can remember, so Kenzie and I've been together 7 years, and she's never like heard me really raise my voice. And sometimes I question, I'm like, that is strange. And then I think just really, really early in life, I'd see people who do react with anger, and then see the other person react. I'm like, oh, that never ever, like a life-threatening situation, you're getting mugged, separate. Yeah. But like in interpersonal communication, like I noticed that there's some responses that never help progress a person in life toward the goal of health, physical health, mental health, financial health.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so for me personally, like anytime probably as a kid, I was, probably got mad that I couldn't get ice cream, but like over time, it really, you can sort of weed out reactions, because at the end of the day, we all just want to be loved, and we all want to be healthy.
Yes, I think you and I both have benefited from some X factor in our lives that have allowed us to see that type of interaction and see it play out. I know a lot of people who just haven't had that benefit. And as you said earlier, there are a lot of people who just have a really hard time acknowledging their own negative self-talk, the self-limiting beliefs, because the brain is so good at fooling us into believing that we're actually in command.
Yeah.
I've now I'm utilizing a metaphor or an analogy of my life being a ship on the ocean of time and experience, and I'm the captain, and I'm standing on the ship, barking orders and heading, setting my heading, and believing that I'm in charge, when in fact all the deckhands, which are my emotions and habits and
what you've been eating and sleeping.
Yes, all of the deckhands are actually whispering to each other, saying, this is how we're going to respond now, and this is where we're going to go. And my first mate, which is my brain, is spectacularly gifted at communicating what's being said by the deckhands and making me believe that it was my decision. That's how the brain functions most of the time.
Pick a direction in life and you rationalize.
Yeah, exactly. I like that you use the term rationalize. The brain, perhaps the most amazing capability of the brain, is to reverse engineer the reaction that it has already determined we're going to take and make it seem like a rational decision made by us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are you someone, if I questioned a core aspect of your belief system, your life, like, do you regret this? Or like, man, like you believe that, you like that. Do you take any, like, would you take offense? Like, would you take it as an affront, or would you take it as an opportunity to kind of like sharpen like your belief system? Because like I've noticed, I love when someone challenges, like, wait, that's why I say I like Kanye's, because like it just provokes people to be like, really, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, this is fun to just entertain ideas. Like I get to bring up the fact of, it came up like a year ago. I'm like, I don't like judging people on their worst moments. He's been famous for 20 years. I bet you've done horrible things in the last 20 years. You don't want to be judged on that day. So it's like it's brought up interesting new beliefs, but a lot of people don't like being challenged a whole lot, So I'm curious, having all this, are you someone who enjoys being challenged?
So I would like to say that I am. I do feel like there are some innate human emotions that when we have, especially our most strongly held beliefs, when they are challenged, we tend to conflate, to to believe that our beliefs are our identity
Mm-hmm.
rather than something we hold. And I've worked in this space for so long, I would like to say I'm above it, but I do know that our fundamental, our base responses, our base reaction is built in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a work in constant progress,
Yeah.
and not something that I could say that I've mastered. I don't believe anybody could say that they've mastered it.
Yeah, I think mastering it with strangers is one thing, and then mastering it with people. I didn't even mean to bring up this much, but Kanye has one lyric that I really like. It's like, life like, this is what your life's like. People really know you push your buttons like a typewriter. And it's like, man, the people who do know, like, there's some people and they really know you, they're just like,
Yeah.
it is interesting. But at a certain point, I do enjoy it because I'm like, man, if I can just be completely, non-reactive in that situation, how easy is it when a complete stranger, to the point where, I don't know, I really think just a level head takes a long time to kind of understand. But then once you realize, I'm like, there's nothing that people can really do that'll be horrible. You can just like, all right. And there's always time, and you can always interject time with a joke, or, you can always like interject time, pause and think, and okay, what's the actual best reaction for how I'm hoping to, if you are trying to make an enemy, sure, anger, but otherwise it's like, all right, maybe just throw a subtle compliment and then comment on the actual, piece of.
Yeah, I think that we do have the capability of building new habits. And that's what I'd like to encourage people to consider. Habits of true listening. Listening is a hard thing to do, honestly. Most listening we do for selfish purposes. And to be able to listen unselfishly is really hard.
I mean, I'd say everything we do is selfish at one point in life, or not at one point. In the primary thought you have all day is, how does this serve me and me, especially with kids? You have to say, how does this serve my kids, which is an extension of your happiness and health. Like, because if your kids die, you're not happy. So at a certain point, everything, and I think the breakaway point is selfish in society today is short-term gain of, I'm going to put you down to get me up. But selfish, reality-wise, is finding people who you can do handshake contracts with on the basis of, we're going to work together in 10 years. We're both going to succeed together. Okay. But we're both going to selfishly, we both succeed from it, Yeah. I really think everyone does, because we make ads. So at a certain point, I have to think, why does someone buy something? Because it makes their life better, because it makes them happy. Like no one buys something for an unselfish reason,
True. I would say regarding listening that we do have the ability, and I've taught this and I've experienced it myself. If I want to understand you, I can step into this conversation with the intent of listening to you to understand your intent. And I, again, as you inferred or implied, I can't get in front of the reactions that you might evoke from what you say. But if I am consciously focused on listening to you, then when those responses, those reactions come up, I will feel them in my gut. And I'll be able to acknowledge the fact that I'm having a reaction. I can take just a second to acknowledge that and then set it aside and get back to focusing on you.
Yeah.
So there is a process, and it is something we can learn.
So it's not necessarily super applicable in like two-way conversations or like mentoring or like partnerships. It's more of like just listening with non-action is what you're referring to?
No, I think we can do it in a conversation. To learn to do it allows us to engage in conversations with a higher degree of respect in that conversation. So without that, every conversation is an argument, because everything is going to create triggers. Every conversation is going to generate anxiety. And so I believe that learning that skill helps in lots of situations, but it's easiest to point out, it's easiest to describe when going purposefully into a conversation with the point of listening.
So when you go into with the goal of listening, there's no goal of like giving, like just to hear someone. See, that's been a core part of my being. I'm like, I never feel the need to feel heard. But like Rick Dancer, who is now in Montana, who's came on the show 3 times, he, especially from his youth, like, I don't remember if he said his father, he never felt heard. So that's why he gets people's stories. Is he thinks people need to feel heard. If I don't feel heard, I just try to say it in a different way. Like, I would say I put it on myself of if someone doesn't hear me, I'm not saying it in the right way, or I'm saying it in a way that they're interpreting it in one way. Like if you've spent your whole life in one industry and then I've spent mine in this, and you say gamut, I'm thinking gamut, you said that earlier, I'm like, that's within a color spectrum, right? But like that might be a completely different thing in your industry. So we just, the miscommunication can happen there. And even if I'm trying to listen, but I don't, and I don't know. And that's a whole other topic. I don't claim that I'm right there, because obviously if people feel better being heard, good for them, power to them. And if there are people to hear them, and I'm not one of them. No, I'm kidding. Even better. So I don't know. When's this, does this relate to small bit? Like, do you hear business people, or this more is like interpersonal in terms of like partners?
So all of this, so when it comes to the book, where it dovetails with professionals and business owners is that I have experienced an inordinate number of business owners who do not recognize that their beliefs about their business are getting in the way of their own progress.
Yeah, 1 second. I'm trying to restart. We just got this camera recently, so I'm still learning a little bit about it. Anyways, their beliefs get in the way of their own business.
Yeah, so the beliefs that a business owner hold can get in the way of their own growth and progress. And the way that happens, as I described earlier, I believe, is that business owners typically hold a story in their head about their business and what it is and what it's doing.
But you just told me I have to come up with those.
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
You do. But those stories can be based on fact, or they can be based on hope, desire, thoughts, visions. And while I love visionary stories, in fact, a successive vision story is one of the stories that I encourage. I had a professional that I was involved with back in the 90s, who handed his financial statements to bankers, and I was young at the time, didn't know what they were. I came and asked about them, and he said, "Yeah, those are the financial statements, and they need them in order to do their thing." I asked him what they said. What do the financials tell us? How are we doing? And his response to me was, I don't want to know what those things say. Okay? It surprised me in the moment, but only later, after I became a commercial banker and branch manager, and then have helped business owners over the last decade, specifically, I've come to realize that in his case, and what I find very common, is that he had this story about his business and how well it was doing. At some level, he knew that the financial statements were not going to support that.
Wow.
And it is far more common than you might think, where a business owner has an idea about their business and they're unwilling to let that go, even when letting go would allow them to make changes, to pivot, to take an opportunity that they can't see because the story in their head is more important to them.
Looking back at Armchair Expert, do you think they were stressed, or do you think they reduced stress in their life by believing that narrative?
Well, I think it reduces stress short term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would increase stress short term for me. That would be like a nightmare. I have no idea. Just be like, that's crazy.
Jim Collins in the book Good to Great, a fantastic business book. He describes the qualities of a leader who is able to take a business that is doing well over time and convert it into a business that's actually doing great. And that's the whole premise of the book. And one of those characteristics is being able to confront the brutal facts. So in that book, he's talking about the same thing, and it is the willingness of leadership and management to actually look at things the way they are and not the way they want them to be, which is, it's a common problem.
There's a very big parallel kind of just how our own brains work. So I guess like before you kind of tied them together there, I was like, I brought you in, I'm like, okay, he's a lot of small, not to pigeonhole you, I mean, specifically put a label on you, but like, and then the majority of the conversation has been so interesting because I've never met someone who's been so cognizant and, you know, about labels in their life. So it's been very fun. I'm like, other people think about how they label themselves as being self kind of fulfilling in their own reality. So it's been a joy, but, and eventually I do want to get it back. So are these just two specific different paths in your life and you're bringing them together with the book, or are you kind of implement a lot of what you know with your work currently?
So I began in 2002 when I started in banking. I very quickly was asked to be a branch manager in a branch that was struggling. Actually, the whole bank at that time was struggling with employee dissatisfaction. I looked up change management models because I wanted to figure out a way to at least help my branch function effectively. And I came across a model called appreciative inquiry, which is change management built around positive storytelling. So it's a way to remind employees of the value that they're providing and provide examples of the good that they're doing by pulling out specific stories that they themselves share. And I had spectacular success with that.
Nice.
Then a few years later, I actually became a competitive speaker and started thinking more about. Yeah, it was it's a Toastmasters thing.
Oh, nice! I went to Toastmasters once.
And got started looking more closely at stories, and eventually, during the downturn of '09, the real estate crash, I built a curriculum around organizational storytelling and professional narrative to help professionals overcome the feelings of anxiety and incapability that they were walking around with during that time. So I built a curriculum around storytelling. So
it's important.
Yeah. So this work it's all come together over time, and the work personally about personal labels. The dynamics are exactly the same. Ultimately, we are defined by the stories that we wrap around ourselves.
Yeah.
And the stories that we choose are determined by the labels that we've affixed.
Have you considered doing this as a dissertation? Like as an actual, it seems like you're very academic about it. You're very knowledgeable. It seems like, I'm so curious, but really quickly, before I formally ask that, I have to say the best example of what you, because I haven't heard your sound, like the examples, Quentin Tarantino. So being on a film set, you get exhausted. You know, you set up this thing, all the actors, everyone's exhausted. You finally get the take at 7. After they get a good take, they say, all right, and we're going to do one more. And why do we do it? And every single person on set says, because we love making movies. Like, that's a very, I mean, it's not quite an example of someone saying, like, I did this and it helped this person, so then I feel better about work. But it's just everyone kind of collectively saying, like, just putting it back in their minds of, like, we have this job because we chose it, but because we love it. And, like,
we love it.
I think things like that, Kenzie and I both are like, as soon as we saw it, because we're just watching documentaries behind the scenes, we're like, we got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful.
Very powerful. Very powerful, because those are the types of, it seems like a very simple thing, but with consistency comes belief.
Yeah.
And that just becomes one of the defining characteristics. That's a story that each of them on the set think about themselves. I'm someone who at the end of the day is going to yell out with everybody else because we love making movies, right? It just becomes an identifying
and it's a positive
habit.
identifier.
Positive
identifiers are so much cooler. Like, I guess society today almost, like, you can't go around like, I'm really happy, or
it's
like whatever.
Really hard,
like, society
isn't it?
really, like, like, oh, hey, if you say you're anxious and depressed, you'll get, like, brownie, like, you'll get praise, or you get attention.
You get the warm fuzzies from negative, from
we're incentivizing, especially youth,
yes,
who really want community. We're incentivizing them and saying, hey, if you identify in a way that's negative about that's...
Think of all the positive strokes you're going to get. Yeah, I have a friend, online friend, somebody I've known for decades, and for the life of me, I can't help her get out of the habit of expressing seemingly all the challenges that she's facing Having been around her, I know that there are a lot of positives that she could share as well, but she's far less interested in sharing those. And it reminds me a bit of my mom, and really sort of diving in, totally embracing the a disempowering label. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's a challenge.
To be fair, I do like if I have a friend who's maybe like they're they're not the greatest place in life. Like I'm not going to share all my wins with them.
No.
So it's like there is interesting, but like someone like yourself, or I have some friend, obviously Mark. Like you can tell the really really good news too. So it is kind of a place and time.
Yeah.
You can facade maybe having one of those, but like because it's just. It's so interesting, and every time I do this, and I'm like reflecting, I'm like, why do I act this way? I'm like, I just want the people around me to be happy. Like I just don't like I don't know. It's really interesting, like why we all tick. So at the end of the day, I could be not completely self-sufficient, but happy with just me and Kenzie, and then the person I'm working for. But like I don't know, because friends are at a certain point, like I don't know, just a burden. Like man, like I wake up at 4 p.m. and I'm like I have to bail on something. It's a lot, but like at the end of the day, I just want everyone to feel happy about themselves and good about themselves.
Right.
So you do a lot to kind of, it's in The Departed, Leonardo DiCaprio says, like, keep an even keel. Like, you like maybe just say some stuff. It's just, I don't know. Did you grow up in a household, maybe not even your parents, but like maybe like a teacher or a friend? Like, do you have examples of people who would get unhappy? Use like, oh, now that person's sad or that person's angry. Did you learn at any specific point that you can maybe point to, or maybe you had a partnership earlier that made you realize like, okay, I'm going to make a conscious effort to make everyone around me like just generally kind of not feel these ways, because I don't like being around them as much. Selfish.
Yeah, I have been. Again, I feel. I once said, I posted online that I was very lucky to have been able to make this change after my accident. And somebody posted later and said, you weren't lucky. It took a lot of self-reflection and a lot of whatever.
You're lucky that you had that self-reflection.
Yeah. So, and I didn't respond because I didn't want to turn it into something. But I was lucky because I wasn't coached to do that. I honestly, when I go back in my life, I feel like, I was always more interested in the teacher than the kids around me. I was pretty academic. My mom really struggled with identity, with her own identity. And maybe it was in reaction to that, even when I was a kid, maybe seeing that and wanting to respond in a different way, in a positive way that she might model. I don't know.
Interesting.
I really don't know. I haven't been able to identify where that comes from, which is why I say I'm lucky, really lucky. And it's also why if I were to try and write the book immediately after making this change in the early 90s, I wouldn't be able to write it. I wouldn't know what to say.
Still living it.
It's been 40 years of work in this, or thinking about this topic, that has informed where I can help people. Because like you said, I want anybody who is ready for a change, who might be inspired, catalyzed by the idea that they can pull off a label, sort of recognize, oh yeah, I'm walking around with these labels and I can take them off. I want anybody who's at that point in their life to get what they need to make it happen. I should say, and I probably should start every interview with this, I know that there are conditions that are not just, that don't allow for choice, right? If someone is clinically depressed, there are chemical imbalances involved with that.
Well,
right?
When I went through Dianetics, they told me there was sort of negative I'm kidding. I read into Scientology one day, and they say like I don't know why I was interested. I was going to watch a Tom Cruise movie or something. Yeah. They claim that like all of those things are just like negative core memories that are part of still how you define yourself. So I thought it was a kind of funny joke, but like no, absolutely, people have very real mental imbalances.
Yes, so I know there are people, and actually a friend of mine, Frank King. He would challenge me on a lot of this because he's one who has suffered with suicide. He's actually a stand-up comedian who talks about his own bout with suicide and has become I think he's I think he's given the largest number of TED Talks in the world.
Wow.
I think he's given 10 official TED Talks or 11 official TED Talks.
Not TEDx.
They might be TEDx,
Still
but
good.
either way,
Yeah.
I think 11 is the number, and that's his focus and he would say that to come up with any type of solution that is hey, just think differently, it wouldn't work for him because he struggles with a chemical imbalance that generates these feelings. And so I don't want anybody thinking that I'm answering that problem.
Yeah.
Right.
To completely divert away from this, to go back. So we're 45 minutes in now. And I got to admit, I partially, maybe not selfishly, because we all are, I was like, man, like before he moves, I'm curious if I can get like some bigger picture ideas of like, you know, there will be a lot of things I'm like, man, I wish I thought about asking that, or like, like I'm not so much to ask you questions or advice, but ask you to really like, so defining those 3 things, which I'll have to listen back to. And honestly, I just want to put straight up on the website. Those are good, but then not living by them if they're not reality, so not continuing them. Do you have any other kind of bigger picture thing? And just for reference, obviously, we just have one client right now. Honestly, we can't really say what our solution is or what makes us different, because what makes it different is my ideal goal in life is to not have to have contracts, to deal with everything on handshakes. And if the first one doesn't go well and I lose out on a couple grand, I don't care. I'm never going to work with you again. My whole goal would be to work with people that I'm going to be working with indefinitely. The compounding interest of having that trust that it will work out mutually in a mutually beneficial way, of just like the peace of mind, I think is so important. And just being like low bureaucracy, but just enjoyable to work with and trustworthy. But then it's like, you know, I don't know if like virtue, you can't say I'm an honest person, because then you're like, that's a kind of a suspect thing for you. You can't virtue signal something that you have to show. So it'll be interesting for how we kind of formulate that. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's really how if I lose money, but I learn not to work with someone, because then if I got to a bigger project and then they were a headache to work with, and they had a better lawyer for the contract and I didn't really read it, I'm like, man, because I've been fortunate enough to work with probably 4 or 5 people in my life that I could just do a large deal with on a handshake and have complete peace of mind to be able to sleep at night that it'll work out.
So from my work at the SBDC, at RAIN, I could certainly never counsel you to do that.
No,
that's your decision.
Not,
yes. that is a business choice that you're making, and I respect it. You love the reasoning.
You could not have a contract at the position you're in. Like, it is necessary for absolutely some things.
Right. So if you're asking me kind of the big picture thing, so I will continue the top line. So of what I call the clarity framework, which is this 1-page business plan.
Maybe you can send it to me afterwards.
I'll do that. I'll do that. I'm happy to. So there are 4 different categories. The first two are the most important, and we don't progress until we've nailed it.
It's a Maslow's for business.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the first one is your business idea, which I already described. The second one is called measures of success. So how are you going to measure success in this business? And I require a financial figure. All right? Because I can't help you build a successful business until you know what it is you want to accomplish with it. If you want to
I can't measure it in free time, because that's the ultimate. The money would only equate to how much free time I get per year.
Okay, and free time is fine, but you have to be able to identify how much money you're gonna earn over a certain amount of time, or within a certain amount of hours, to give you the free time.
Okay.
So it'll always come to business. There are transactions in business, so there will always be a number, and I require it.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And then the next one is the tough one for people because they don't want to do it, which is taking that measure of success, taking their business idea and asking, how many of these ideas do I have to produce and sell in order to achieve this goal? And so it becomes a matter of numbers. A lot of people really struggle with those 3. actually getting to a point where they're saying, I need to do X amount of business. And the best example of this actually was during the 90s when I was on the board of the Watercolor Society of Oregon, because I began my professional life as an artist. I'm on their board, and they asked me to give a presentation on the numbers, just the financial realities of doing business as a professional artist. And I asked a very simple thing. If you wanted to make, I made the math really easy. If you wanted to make $26,000 a year doing your art, okay, that's not very much, but I made it easy, right? $26,000.
Wouldn't 25 be easy?
No, 26 is easier because there are 52 weeks in a year.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if I'm going to net $26,000, and the gallery is always going to take half, roughly, I need to sell $1,000 of art every week in order to end up with $26,000 in my bank account. That's not counting any other expenses. Yeah. But let's just say you're a watercolorist, so paints are cheap. So
that puts in perspective for a lot.
It is really simple. And honestly, I just sucked the life out of that room.
Oh, I bet.
Because nobody in that room, barring a couple true professionals, nobody in that room had actually gone through the math. Everyone in that room considered themselves a professional artist. And the vast 95% of them weren't anywhere close to that.
Wow.
I wasn't anywhere close to that. I actually suffered from all of that, the living in the ambiguity because it's safe, and I'm not accountable to anything if it's not clear. I lived in that space myself, and it was only going through this exercise myself that I realized I was so far from being the artist, being the professional that I had planned on being, and ultimately made decisions to change because of that.
Wow. I'm dying to hear the fourth step. Not to just like pass over that.
Oh, well, yeah.
I am genuinely listening.
Yeah.
But.
So the fourth step is proof of demand. So this is the final piece to get a business really ready to even start sketching out is, do you actually have demand for all of this?
So if we're past we started the business because the first four steps were existing. And Kenzie and I were independently just taking money for doing shared work.
Yeah.
And we're like, let's put a name to it. And then, a month went into finding it. And the company name, it's nowhere. We got all the email, the website, the socials, everything. Good Marketing Works.
Okay. Excellent.
How crazy is that? It's goodmarketing.works. So instead of goodmarketingworks.com, because that's some Finnish company or whatever. Yeah. But Good Marketing Works. And we're like, oh, it's just, it says it all in it because we're going to put our names or whatever. And we're like, nope, Good Marketing Works.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So we're really happy. And now we're still just, going to take in it just independently. And then we're just going to get a shared credit card and just pay off half of it for expenses. We're so... And my rationale behind maybe hopefully this isn't too personal. Kenzie can ex-nay this a little part of it. But if I had a contractor, or if I had two contractors that were for each one amount of money, or one contracting service for twice that amount, it seems like, and then I was at a place where I was cutting, I'd be like, oh, I can cut one thing and save twice as much money as cutting two things. Is that logical, or would it be simpler to just do it together and then split it on our end? Yeah.
Pragmatically, I don't know that it's going to make a whole lot of difference. I feel like that's actually an emotional. I think that's a relationship decision. And
we're happy either way.
Yeah.
We're thinking of psychologically the person
who's
contracting us. Would they see one big number as more than two little numbers? Because you're getting two people each for that much, whereas you're getting one. This is where this is coming from.
Yeah.
I'm like, you must have dealt with this a lot more.
Well, so where I can see that is the perception that by hiring two, I have two different teams working. So it seems like there's a larger team working if I've got two contracts out there as opposed to one. I think rather than the money's going to be a wash, and I'll see that pretty quickly. But I do feel like there might be benefit in having it spread out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
don't
that
know.
reason.
These are like the places we're at. We're like, I have, and the biggest thing, and I've kind of sussed it out. So quarterly estimated payments, those are just like, for fun. They're like, you don't have to actually do them. Like my real thing is, I'm like, they charge you like 4 or 5 or 6% a year, but then Apple's has a savings account that gives you 4% a year. So I'm like, couldn't I just put it in there and it's kind of near a wash at the end, or roughly 2%? I don't know. These things, would I go to Rain or would I go to SBDC?
I'd go to SBDC for that. Actually, you could go to the SBDC for that. They could get you an answer pretty quickly. I would encourage you to find a CPA or accountant who can also help you with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Like and lately when people are like, oh, so like you like, we aren't necessarily looking for more. Like we're not measuring it in money because we're just like our primary thing in life. I'm like, it's summer. I don't want to be inside video editing all day. Like, I think a lot of people, if your goal is a monetary number, it can be good, but at a certain point, your happiness and health really dictate everything in your life. If you're killing yourself to hit that number, why are you doing it? You know?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I will say that for a business to be built effectively, you have to understand it's a business is a machine.
It's accounting for more than just like an independent or a couple of people. You're accounting for
so if I were counseling, I would say let's build the business to allow you all the free time you're looking for. Right? That's the machine you want to create. Mm-hmm. But to ignore the numbers, you don't know. If you're ignoring the numbers, you don't know when you're pretty soon going to lose the flexibility, lose the freedom to take advantage of the hours you want to take advantage of.
That makes sense.
So I would still counsel to build the machine as it will work. And if I can, just recognize that almost everybody who starts a business believes that most everybody in the world needs and wants what they have to offer. And all they have to do is get that product out there and everything's going to be fine.
Good marketing works. That's what we're here for. No, I'm kidding.
Well, so
we don't feel that as a marketing company. We're like, like some companies, I don't know. It's fat. Like being a marketing company is weird because you're specifically saying people believe that marketing is all they need for their business to work, but we're marketing we'd be marketing ourselves. I don't know. It gets very meta when you start looking at it.
Yeah. But most business owners, if they've got a product, they've got a service they want to do. I had the same situation when I had a consulting company in 2009 and 10. And I had built this hybrid model that I was sure everybody in the world would need and want. And what I found was that there were two pieces of this. Half the people who were participating wanted one piece. The other half wanted the other piece. Almost nobody wanted both. And it created this, it wasn't a toxic dynamic, but it wasn't a productive dynamic. And so we can all fool ourselves into believing that the world wants what we have. And products like the pet rock, sort of prove that. But even pet rock was solving a problem for somebody. Yeah. And so really focusing in and proving that you have a market for your idea is essential.
Cool. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So do you mostly, and just to kind of wrap both things up, because man, I'm really you have two massive, I'm curious, do you have a third? We can't get into it today.
No. We'll just leave it there.
So those are your two main kind of things that bring you genuine interest and you drive man, I'm because learning feels really good, doesn't it?
It feels
like an explorer of just oh, that's an interesting idea.
There have been two themes that I've landed on. The first one was storytelling and identity. And that's what I'm going back to with the book.
I'm excited to read it.
Beginning with with the Springfield Chamber back in 2015-16 when I started there, through the SBDC and RAIN, I have really embraced the concept of clarity and recognizing that how much the human loves ambiguity because it's safe, it's warm, it's comfortable, doesn't require me to accomplish anything. Yeah. It's such a comfortable space, and I myself feel that all the time. And so those are the two different themes. They actually tie together pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
But those are two different themes that I've been focused on over the last 20 years.
Well, I'm excited for if in 3 years you do end up coming back. I would absolutely love to speak with you and just see if I can get an advanced copy of the cookbook as it's becoming further along. I would love to read it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
I appreciate it. All right.
Clap us out.